I was the girl nobody noticed. At every wedding, I was the silent shadow in the corner. No dances, no toasts, no one looking twice. Until he walked in. The billionaire no one ever thought would even glance my way, let alone reach for my hand in front of the entire room. Gasps echoed. Whispers flew. My cousin's wedding turned into something else entirely. And in that single moment, my life split in two, before him and after. This isn't just a love story. It's a story about power, perception, and the one choice that shook an entire room full of people who thought they knew where I belonged. If you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or out of place, stay with me. Because what happened after that dance will change the way you see fate, forever. And trust me, you won't see the ending coming. Hit that subscribe button. You're not going to want to miss this. My name is Maya, and for 28 years, I was invisible, even to the people who were supposed to love me most. I wasn't the golden child with grand announcements. I wasn't the wild one causing drama. I was the afterthought, the empty chair at dinner no one noticed, the RSVP no one counted on. I spent my days in a quiet town library, surrounded by epic romances and daring adventures, while my own story felt like the most boring book on the shelf, a forgotten footnote no one would bother reading. But that was before one unbelievable twist shattered my quiet existence. Before one unexpected visitor checked out more than just a book and turned my forgotten life into a headline. If you've ever felt like the background in your own story, stay with me. Because what happened next rewrote everything. And trust me, you won't believe who was watching all along. I've always been different from the rest of my family. While my cousins were cheerleaders and prom queens, I was the one with her nose buried in a book. While they dated the popular boys and went to every party, I spent Friday nights cataloging new arrivals and helping elderly patrons find their favorite romance novels. My family loves me, don't get me wrong, but I could see it in their eyes, that mixture of pity and confusion, like they couldn't quite figure out how I fit into their world of social gatherings and small-town drama. The only person who truly understood me was my grandmother, Anna. At 83, she had more wisdom in her pinky finger than most people have in their entire bodies. We lived together in her old Victorian house on Maple Street, the one with creaky floors and roses that bloomed wild in the front yard. Every evening, we'd sit on the porch swaying, her knitting while I read aloud from whatever book had captured my attention that day. She never made me feel invisible. To her, I was perfectly enough just as I was. Then came the invitation that would change everything. My cousin Rebecca, the golden child of our family, was getting married. Not just any wedding. This was going to be the social event of the year. Rebecca had managed to snag the son of the wealthiest family in the county, and she wasn't letting anyone forget it. The invitation itself was more expensive than my monthly grocery budget, printed on thick cream paper with gold lettering that practically screamed luxury. I stared at that invitation for 3 days straight, feeling my stomach twist into knots. These weren't my people. I knew exactly what would happen. I'd sit at some corner table nursing a single glass of punch while everyone else danced and laughed and lived their glamorous lives. I'd worn the same navy blue dress to the last 4 family weddings. And while it was perfectly nice, it wasn't exactly what you'd call wedding appropriate for an event that was sure to be featured in the local society pages. "You're going," Grandma Anna declared one morning, catching me staring at the invitation again. "And you're going to hold your head high." She had that tone in her voice that meant arguing was pointless. "Maya, honey, you spend so much time hiding behind those books that you forget you have your own story to live." But here's the thing about small towns. Everyone knows everyone's business, and everyone knows exactly where they stand in the social hierarchy. At the very top of our little world sat Vincent Sterling, a man who seemed to exist in a completely different universe from mine. He'd inherited his father's business empire at 25 and had somehow managed to triple its value in just 5 years. Vincent Sterling was the kind of man who drove cars that cost more than most people's houses, wore suits that were probably hand-tailored in Italy, and could buy and sell half our town without breaking a sweat. I'd seen him around, of course. In a town of 8,000 people, you see everyone eventually. He'd come into the library occasionally, always polite but distant, like he was visiting from another planet. The difference between his world and mine wasn't just about money. It was about confidence, about belonging, about knowing that when you walked into a room, people noticed you for all the right reasons. While I spent my days hoping to remain invisible, Vincent Sterling commanded attention simply by existing. We might as well have been living on different continents. The morning of Rebecca's wedding, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, feeling like I was about to attend my own execution. That navy blue dress looked even more pathetic than I remembered, hanging on my small frame like a deflated balloon. I tried to do something special with my hair, but my brown waves refused to cooperate, falling flat despite an entire can of hairspray. Next to me on the dresser sat Grandma Anna's pearl earrings, the only fancy thing I owned, passed down through 3 generations of women who probably never felt as out of place as I did in that moment. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," Grandma Anna said from the doorway. But I could hear the gentle lie in her voice. She was trying so hard to boost my confidence. Bless her heart. Remember what I always tell you. It's not about what you're wearing. It's about what's in here. She tapped her chest right over her heart. And you, Maya Catherine Williams, have the most beautiful heart I've ever known. The wedding venue was the grand ballroom at Riverside Manor, a place I'd only seen in the local newspaper society section. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings so high they seemed to touch the clouds, and everything sparkled like something out of a fairy tale. I felt like Alice tumbling down the rabbit hole, except instead of Wonderland, I'd landed in a world where everyone spoke in whispers about stock portfolios and European vacations. While I tried to figure out which fork to use for the salad, they'd seated me at table 12. What I quickly realized was code for the leftover relatives and plus ones nobody really wanted to invite. There was Rebecca's great-aunt Martha, who talked exclusively about her cats, a couple of distant cousins I'd met maybe twice in my entire life, and 3 empty chairs that told their own story about last-minute cancellations. While the head tables buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses, our little corner felt like we were watching the party through a window. I watched as Rebecca floated through the reception in her $1,000 dress, accepting congratulations and air kisses from people who looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine. Her new husband's family dominated the room, successful lawyers, doctors, business owners who wore their wealth like perfectly tailored armor. And somewhere among them was Vincent Sterling, looking effortlessly elegant in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than I made in 3 months. The thing about being invisible is that you become an excellent observer. I noticed things others missed, like how Rebecca's smile became strained whenever someone mentioned the cost of the wedding, or how the maid of honor kept checking her phone instead of celebrating with her best friend. But what I noticed most was the little flower girl, Rebecca's 4-year-old niece, Emma, sitting alone at the kids' table with tears streaming down her cheeks. Her beautiful white dress had a huge tear right down the front, probably from running around before the ceremony. The other children had moved away from her, not wanting to be associated with someone who looked messy, and the adults were too busy networking to notice her distress. Without thinking, I grabbed my purse and walked over to her table. I always carried a small sewing kit, a habit I'd picked up from Grandma Anna, who believed in being prepared for life's little emergencies. "Hey there, Emma," I said softly, kneeling down beside her chair. "That's a pretty dress. Wanting to help fix it." Her little face lit up like I'd offered her the moon. For the next 20 minutes, I carefully mended the tear with tiny invisible stitches while she told me about her favorite dolls and how she wanted to be a princess when she grew up. When I finished, you could barely tell there had ever been a problem. "You're like a fairy godmother," Emma whispered, throwing her small arms around my neck. And for a moment, sitting there with this sweet little girl, I felt like maybe I did have some magic after all. What I didn't realize was that someone had been watching our entire interaction from across the room. Vincent Sterling had noticed the quiet librarian in the simple blue dress, noticed how she'd left her lonely corner table to help a crying child that everyone else had ignored. As I walked back to my table, feeling slightly better about the evening, I nearly tripped over my own feet when I saw him approaching. Vincent Sterling was walking directly toward me, his eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that made my heart hammer against my ribs. The conversations around us seemed to fade into white noise, and I swear I could feel every pair of eyes in that ballroom turning to watch what was about to unfold. "Excuse me," he said, and his voice was exactly what I'd imagined. Deep, confident, with just a hint of warmth that caught me completely off guard. "I'm Vincent Sterling. I couldn't help but notice what you just did for Emma. That was incredibly kind." He paused, and I realized he was actually nervous. Vincent Sterling, the man who commanded boardrooms and closed million-dollar deals, was nervous talking to me. "I was wondering if you'd like to dance." The entire ballroom seemed to hold its breath. I could practically feel the shock radiating from every table, the whispered conversations that would start the moment we walked away. Rebecca's mouth was hanging open so wide, I worried she might catch flies. The maid of honor dropped her champagne glass. Even the band seemed to pause for a moment as if they couldn't believe what they were witnessing. My first instinct was to say no, to mumble some excuse and retreat back to my safe corner table where I belonged. But then I looked into Vincent's eyes, really looked, and I saw something I never expected to see. Genuine interest. Not pity, not charity, but actual curiosity about who I was. And suddenly, Grandma Anna's voice echoed in my head. "You have your own story to live, Maya." "I'd like that," I heard myself say, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'd like that very much." Vincent's hand was warm and steady as he led me to the dance floor, and I tried to ignore the fact that every person in that room was staring at us like we were some kind of circus act. The band, perhaps sensing the drama of the moment, began playing something slow and romantic, and suddenly, I was in Vincent Sterling's arms, moving to music I'd only dreamed of dancing to. "You're shaking," he said gently, his breath warm against my ear. "Don't worry about them. Just focus on me." And somehow, that's exactly what I did. As we swayed together on that dance floor, the rest of the world seemed to fade away. It was just us, the music, and the surprising realization that Vincent Sterling was not at all what I'd expected. "So you're the librarian," he said, and there was no condescension in his voice, no judgment, just genuine curiosity. "I've seen you at the library. You always look so peaceful there, like you belong among all those stories." I nearly stumbled in surprise. He'd noticed me. All those times he'd come in for business journals or research materials, he'd actually seen me. "It's my favorite place in the world," I admitted, finding my voice despite the surreal situation. "Every book is like a doorway to somewhere else. Sometimes I think I know the characters better than I know real people." I immediately regretted saying something so honest, so revealing of how lonely my life really was. But Vincent smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and transformed his entire face. "I understand that completely," he said. "Do you know how many dinner parties I've attended where I felt like I was surrounded by fictional characters? People playing parts, saying what they think they should say, never revealing anything real about themselves." As we continued to dance, he told me things I never would have expected, how exhausting it was to always be on, to have people want things from you because of your money rather than who you were as a person, how lonely it could be at the top, surrounded by people who laughed at your jokes because they felt they had to, not because anything you said was actually funny, how he'd started coming to the library not just for research, but because it was one of the few places in town where he could just be a person, reading a book, not Vincent Sterling the businessman. "I watched you tonight," he continued, his voice dropping to that intimate whisper that made my pulse race. "The way you helped Emma without hesitation, without thinking about what anyone else would think. Most people in this room walked right past a crying child because she didn't fit into their perfect evening. But you saw her. You saw someone who needed help, and you helped. Do you have any idea how rare that is? I felt tears pricking at the corners of my eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming feeling of being truly seen for the first time in my life. Here was this man who could have had the attention of any woman in the room, and he was telling me that my kindness, the thing I'd always considered my most unremarkable quality, was what had caught his eye. "I don't feel rare," I whispered back. "I feel invisible most of the time." "Then everyone else is blind," he said with such conviction that I almost believed him. "Maya, that's your name, right? You're the most genuine person I've met in years. In a room full of people trying to impress each other, you were the only one actually living." The song ended too soon, but Vincent didn't let go of my hand. Instead, he led me to a quieter corner of the ballroom, away from the staring eyes and whispered conversations. We talked for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes about books, dreams, and the strange way life sometimes surprises you when you least expect it. He asked for my phone number, and when I gave it to him, he entered it into his phone like it was the most precious information he'd ever received. "I'd like to call you," he said. "Not because I feel sorry for you. Not because I'm trying to be charitable, but because talking to you tonight has been the first real conversation I've had in months, and I'd like to have more of them." I looked around the ballroom one more time at my cousin Rebecca, who was still staring at us in shock, at the relatives who suddenly seemed very interested in talking to me, at the world that had shifted on its axis in the span of a single dance. For the first time in my 28 years, I felt like I mattered. Not because of what I could do for someone else, not because I was useful or convenient, but simply because I was me. "I'd like that too," I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. 6 months later, I'm sitting in that same library where I used to feel so safe and invisible. But everything has changed. Vincent calls me every morning before work, not because he has to, but because he wants to hear my voice before he starts his day. We've had dinners 17 times, coffee dates countless times, and long walks through the town where people now look at me with curiosity instead of pity. But the biggest change isn't in how others see me. It's in how I see myself. That night at Rebecca's wedding, when Vincent took my hand in front of everyone, something inside me woke up. I realized that I'd been so afraid of being rejected that I'd rejected myself first, hiding behind books in quiet corners instead of living my actual life. Vincent and I are different in many ways. He still wears those expensive suits and drives cars that turn heads, while I still prefer my simple dresses and my beat-up Honda. But we're the same in the ways that matter. We both believe in kindness over wealth, in genuine connection over social status, and in seeing people for who they really are rather than what they can do for you. Grandma Anna says she knew it would happen all along, that she could see something special in Vincent the first time he came into the library. "He looked at you like you were the most interesting book on the shelf," she told me last week, her eyes twinkling with satisfaction. "And you, my dear, are a story worth reading." I still work at the library, still help elderly patrons find their favorite romance novels, still catalog new arrivals on quiet Friday afternoons. But now, I also help Vincent with the literacy program he's funding for underprivileged children, and I've started a book club that meets at the community center every Tuesday night. I'm writing my own story now instead of just reading other people's. Rebecca's wedding was 6 months ago, but people in town still talk about it. About the night the quiet librarian danced with the richest man in town and changed everything. They don't know that the real magic wasn't in that dance, beautiful as it was. The real magic was in learning that I was never invisible at all. I was just looking in the wrong mirrors, listening to the wrong voices, waiting for permission to be seen that I never needed in the first place. Sometimes, the person who notices your worth is someone you never expected. Sometimes, kindness is the most attractive quality you can possess. And sometimes, just sometimes, the girl who always felt like she was watching life from the sidelines gets to step into the spotlight and discover she belonged there all along. That's my story. That's how a simple woman who felt ignored her entire life learned that she was worth noticing. And if you're out there feeling invisible right now, wondering if anyone sees you, I want you to know something. You are not invisible. You are not worthless. You are not too quiet or too plain or too ordinary to matter. You are exactly enough just as you are. Sometimes, it just takes the right person at the right moment to help you see what was always true. Maya's story reminds us that we never know when life will surprise us. Sometimes the person who sees our worth is exactly who we least expect. If this story hit you in a place words can't quite reach, don't just scroll past it. Hit that like button to say, I see you. Share this video with someone who's ever felt invisible in a room full of noise. And if you've ever had that one unforgettable moment where someone finally looked your way and really saw you, drop your story in the comments. Because sometimes it only takes one moment to change everything. Subscribe now for more true stories that prove even the quietest voices deserve to shake the world.